hadn't intended to talk about this, but I think it's important that we do. Mark Weaver is a great friend. He's a constitutional attorney. He used to be a spokesperson for the DOJ. And so, Mark, I'll start with this. How does this land on your ears? Obviously, broad-based press objection to this. Your reaction?
I think we're seeing a world in which the Trump administration is doing things differently. It makes some of the people who've been there for many years uncomfortable. The Defense Department, now called the War Department, where I worked, the Justice Department, these are not public spaces. The general public can't mill around inside the Pentagon, for example. And so reporters, some might say, well, they're not the general public. Well, anymore, the bar to get a press pass is pretty low. And many of them are from other countries, which may or may not have relationships with the spy networks of those countries. So the notion of we'd like to be careful about where you can go in the Pentagon and whether you're encouraging Pentagon employees to leak seems reasonable to me.
I mean, I remember when we struck Iran, the press was jumping up and down. I don't know that they were mad, but some of them sounded irritated that it was such an airtight mission. They didn't know about it until after it was over. You remember their reaction to that?
I do. They think they're entitled to know the news as it happens. This wasn't true in World War II. Now, technology was different in World War II, but information about D-Day got out much later after D-Day happened for obvious reasons. And so this notion that the press have the right to be on the cutting edge of what's happening at the War Department or in places like where I worked at the Justice Department is simply not based in the Constitution. Having said that, there should be some level of transparency, and allowing journalists to cover the work of government is an important check on government corruption.
Yeah. Signing a pledge, I don't know about that. I mean, do you like that or not? Does that bother you? Hey, sign this, agree to these conditions if you're going to cover the Pentagon?
I don't know that you need to have them sign a pledge. You can say, here are the rules. If you want to be in this non-public space, here are our rules. And people who go outside those rules can have their press credentials removed.
I think Hegseth should just come out and explain it, as he brilliantly did, talking about no more fat generals. Hegseth's best when he just talks and explains where they are, and I think they should just explain a little more. That's it. But anyway, thanks for tackling that. Not where we intended to go. There's a lot. I didn't intend to bring this up either, but while we're at it, Louisiana. There's a huge case before the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court ends up saying, and I think they're going to, Mark, you can't draw district boundary lines in your state based on a racial populace. You can't do that. I think the Supreme Court's going to say that, and when they do, it could lead to an avalanche of redistricting all across the country and could mean a huge pickup of Republican seats.
I think that's right. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 allows the Justice Department to bring lawsuits based on race-based lines. But historically, Justice Departments have only done it when the lines favored whites and disfavored blacks or other minority groups. And what the Supreme Court said a couple of years ago about race-based admissions in colleges was it violates the 14th Amendment. It violates equal protection. So I can see them saying the same thing, which is you shouldn't be able to draw lines to help one racial group or another. And as a result, I'm with you. I would not be surprised if this Supreme Court strikes down the as-applied challenge on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
One more, just that we're keeping a watch on, this from readlion.com. I thought it notable. Jack Smith has been called to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. This is the special prosecutor that packed up shop, packed up his tent, and ran away once Trump won re-election, but moved heaven and earth to try to get him prosecuted until then. What would you be looking for in a Jack Smith testimony before Congress?
What did he know and when did he know it about what people in the White House knew? Remember, Jack Smith was not an independent counsel like Ken Starr was, who reported to nobody. He was a Justice Department appointee. And as a result, he worked for Merrick Garland, who was Biden's attorney general, and he worked for Joe Biden. I want to know how much the White House was involved in what he did, which was essentially a persecution against Donald Trump, not a prosecution.
Not to mention members of Congress and this Operation Arctic Frost business. That's also a major part of this story, is it not?
It is, and we all learned in school about Watergate, which was an attempt to bug the Democrat National Committee headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, but very little came of it. It was kind of a second or third rate burglary that showed that the president tried to cover it up. Arctic frost reveals a much wider sweeping attempt to surveil political enemies, not just members of the Senate, but also conservative groups like Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, who were also surveilled by the Biden FBI. Very troubling.
Congressional investigators have collected a stunning 30 million lines of phone data mapping, contacts between conservatives, the Trump White House, all in the name of investigating the January 6th Capitol breach. It was a massive dragnet that raises civil liberty concerns about the risk of limits on the ability of lawmakers to snoop on Americans' private phone calls. This is another shoot of this same poisonous root, isn't it?
It is. And my question to the Biden FBI would have been, were you putting this much resources into looking into the phone calls of human traffickers or people bringing fentanyl across the southern border and killing so many people in this country? Where was the intensity of investigation against those people who are causing deadly consequences, not your political opponents in the Senate or in conservative groups?
Finally, Mark Weaver, the Supreme Court has rejected Alex Jones' appeal of $1.4 billion defamation judgment in the Sandy Hook case. We all know that he was hit hard for what he said on his show about the Sandy Hook massacre being a false flag operation or whatever he said. I don't know. I'm not an enthusiast of his, but neither here nor there. This case always troubled me, Mark, because whatever it is he said on his show is something he said on his show, and he's basically now going to be destroyed financially for having said it. $1.4 billion. The Supreme Court said we're not touching it. So how do you read this?
Well, there's two cases, one in Connecticut, a blue state, which is like $1.3 billion in damages, and one in Texas, a red state. That's still working its way through the courts. It shows you that lawfare on the amount of his damages is live and well in places like Connecticut. I do think he's the author of most of his problems. He refused to cooperate with the court process, which is why he got into this position. But having said that, the amount of damages seems excessive.
Yeah. Not surprising that the Supreme Court wouldn't get involved, or is it surprising? They just didn't want to touch this?
Well, Supreme Court hears very few cases, and they're supposed to be one of federal law and national impact. And it's hard to say that a state defamation case is about federal law. It's not. And it really isn't much about national impact. So they turn away 99% of the cases filed. No surprise they turned this one away.
Lastly, Justice Alito had some choice words for some lower courts on Tuesday about their apparent eagerness to avoid ruling on cases involving schools transing children. Surprise you that Alito got aggressive on this? No,
he's a strong member of that court. He's got a strong voice, and he's using his own voice with his name to it. But many of these inferior court judges have been leaking to outfits like the New York Times and speaking anonymously, typically poorly about the Trump administration. They're acting like politicians in black robes. I like Alito standing out and saying what he thinks, and we all know it's him saying it.
Mark Weaver, brilliant, pithy, busy. This is just but one stop on his very busy day. We're always grateful that he makes time for us because there's never a shortage of legal analysis that we need, and we lean on him for it. Get his book, by the way, A Wordsmith's Work. If you don't have it, it is absolutely worth your read. If you like the way Mark communicates, he'll tell you how to do it. Mark, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
God bless you, Chris. Good to see you.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.